All set? Okay, adequate notice of the September the 12th, 2019 meeting has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting written notice and agenda of this meeting on the bulletin board in the Municipal Building, 1000 Route 10, Township of Hanover, and by hand delivering, mailing, or faxing such notice and agenda to the following newspapers: Morris County's Daily Record, the Star Ledger, Hanover Eagle, and by filing same with the Township Clerk. I have a roll call.
On roll call, Committeeman Gallagher.
Here.
Committeeman Ferramaska.
Here.
Committeeman Mahalko.
Here.
Committeeman Cahill.
Here.
And Mayor Francioli.
Here.
5 members in attendance, sir.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, would you all please rise and join me in a pledge of allegiance to the flag and remain standing for prayer. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Almighty God, we ask that you bless this governing body with an abundance of wisdom and understanding, so that every deliberation will result in actions which will promote the common good and the general welfare for all of the people of Hanover Township.
Thank you.
Amen.
Good, ladies and gentlemen, would you please remain standing for a moment of silence for all of those to be remembered who perished September the 11th, 2001. Thank you very much. Please be seated. At this time, we have a proclamation of the Township Committee, the Township of Hanover, congratulating the Cedar Knolls Fire Department. It was quite a blast, by the way, last Saturday. On the celebration of their 100th anniversary of the formation of the fire company in 1919, professional fighting services, bravery, devotion, and dedication to the Hanover Township community. Okay, we have such a...
I think Committeeman Cahill wanted
to make that offer that proclamation?
Before reading the proclamation, just congratulations to Cedar Knolls Fire Department. Again, as you just stated, the actual anniversary is September 19th, 1919, for the 100-year anniversary. At that time, when they first incorporated, basically, at that time, they already had 25 members, along with Chief George Hill and Assistant Chief Peter Pillion. So it's a familiar name there, at least one familiar name from town's history. So congratulations to Cedar Knolls. Fantastic. May there be another 100 years.
Yep.
Committeeman, you want to offer that? You want to offer that into the record?
Yes.
Make a motion.
Make a motion.
Seconded.
Okay, on roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
You want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Whereas the Cedar Knolls Fire Department was organized on September 19th, 1919, under the leadership of George Hild, in order to provide fire suppression services to the residents of the Cedar Knolls section of Hanover Township. And whereas since its formation in 1919, the Cedar Knolls Fire Department, consisting of over 50 active volunteers, continue to excel in providing outstanding fire prevention and fire suppression services to the entire Hanover Township community. And whereas the officers and rank and file members of the Cedar Knolls Fire Department exhibit unselfish devotion to the people of Hanover Township by risking their own lives and by making personal sacrifices in actively serving as professionally trained firefighters in protecting the lives and property of residents and businesses or those who travel through our community on a daily basis. And whereas when the proverbial alarm bell rings, the volunteer members of the Cedar Knolls Fire Department are prepared to cope with any incident, great or small, in protecting the lives and property of all citizens who either make their home or work in the township. And whereas the members of the Cedar Knolls Fire Department serve with valor and distinction and embody the same high level of dedication and professionalism as Chief Hild and the original members of the department. And whereas, as the Township Committee comes together with members of the Cedar Knolls Fire Department and residents of the community to celebrate the establishment of the department, let us not forget the valor and courage that these professionally trained firefighters display 24 hours a day in placing the public safety needs of the township first and foremost. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Township Committee of the Township of Hanover in the County of Morrison, State of New Jersey as follows. 1. Upon the 100th anniversary celebration of the formation of the Cedar Knolls Fire Department on September 19, 2019, the governing body wishes to acknowledge and publicly thank each and every member of the department for their dedication and commitment in serving the Hanover Township community by providing exceptional professional firefighting services whenever the need arises. Their bravery, courage, and dedication must never be forgotten. 2, the Township Committee is proud to recognize the achievements of the Cedar Knolls Fire Department for their many years of exemplary service and call upon all residents of the Township to offer their sincere congratulations and best wishes as the Fire Department begins its second century of distinguished service. Signed, Ronald F. Francioli, Mayor, on behalf of the Township Committee.
Thank you, Joe. Very good. Hey, Brian, you see that Chief DeGiorgio receives that?
I will. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Very good. All right, gentlemen, at this time, I'd like to open the meeting to the public. A motion to open.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open. Anyone who would like to address the Township Committee at this time can do so from the podium, giving us your name and address for the record. Jim, got anything to talk about? There you go. Give you some time.
Linda Oakes, 39 Courtright Road in Whippany. I don't have anything prepared like I normally do for you guys tonight because it's been a very long week of our first week of school, so I'm sure you guys can appreciate that. So I have some questions for everybody that really, I think, I just want to get a better understanding of the pilot program or the tax thing here. I also want to just thank you. I think that the presentation you made at the last meeting was very helpful. It was very clear. I've been absorbing everything that was said, but it also left me with quite a few questions. So I guess my first question is, can somebody explain where the money from the pilot goes within the town for the properties that are currently under pilot?
I'm going to have our counsel explain it to you far better than I can, but I will tell you, you know the initials stand for payment in lieu of taxes.
Yes, I do. I
So that means
totally get that. So that's why I
it.
just want to
There's
understand.
a sum of money paid in which the township then controls the distribution. So on that
Right.
note, Fred, if you want to explain the pilot.
Yeah, I think you asked, your question was for where does the money go?
Yeah, what do you guys do with the money? You have, I think there's 3 properties currently that are under pilot in town?
There's one.
One, oh, okay, one.
And
So
that
where does that
development-
money go within the town?
Well, it goes with the rest of the town's tax revenue that it collects. But that particular property is all affordable units.
Okay,
So, and that's the only pilot that we have on record. There's not 3. So-
Okay.
But that's where it goes.
so does any of that get transferred to the school property, the taxes that we pay for the schools?
Well, I don't know, when you mean transferred, like
Well,
there's an
I mean,
agreement?
where does, if they pay you
No,
$10,000,
probably doesn't.
do
It's
you
much
use that
like-
for?
It's much like this evening, there's a tax appeal that the township is addressing.
Okay,
And it may result in a refund of taxes of about $400,000. And out of that refund, the town doesn't go back and say to the school, 40% of that was paid to you. There's certain things that just don't go back to the school and certain things that don't go back from the town. So in that pilot program, no, I think there's a small percentage that goes to the county. I think it's 5%. But the remaining portion goes to the town, just like when you have commercial development, even though it may not generate anything for the schools, about 40% of those taxes do go to the schools. About, what's paid to the towns. But so that's just the way the law works. There's been legislation to try to change that so that, all the things I just told you, like, for example, tax refunds. there's been legislation to say tax refunds should be charged back to the county and the school, or pilots should go to the school. But right now, the way the law is, that's the way it works.
So what services do we provide, I guess, that development that has a pilot in lieu of taxes? Like, do we do all their streets and all their sanitation just like the rest of the town? Or because it's a condo complex, are they responsible for their own, like, are all those streets privatized and they do like dumpster garbage, or?
You're just speaking about the
You said we have
affordable
one.
housing development.
Yeah, Willow?
I think they're treated like every other development, Joe, unless I...
That's correct.
Right,
Yeah.
they're treated like any other, development.
Okay.
We would have to. We
Okay.
can't treat them any differently.
Okay, so when River Park is approved, can you clarify if that entire unit is going to be on pilot, or if it's just the affordable part of that? Because the settlement, the way I read it and understood it, is that all 950-plus units of River Edge, or whatever it's called, will be under pilot.
At this point, there's no pilot agreement in place. But
Okay.
it's anticipated that that very well may happen. And when that happens, the governing body can make a decision, if it so chooses, to work an ordinance or an arrangement with an allocation to the schools. And towns have done that, and that's an option. And as far as services go, with respect to that development, and mind you, I think 93% of the units in that development are one-bedroom or two-bedroom units. And with respect to that development, there will be no, the municipal services you just asked about, the like sanitation pickup and snow removal and reimbursement for that, none of that will be paid by the township.
Okay.
Or provided. And the commercial portion of River Park and the development, that will be paid to the taxes that are generated there. That goes back to what I'd call more conventional, and 40% of the taxes from the commercial aspect of River Park, because I think about 40% of the tax bill goes...
55.
How much?
55.
Oh, 55 will go to the schools.
Okay. And did you guys do any reports of how many kids you estimate to be in that complex once it's complete? Out of 950-plus units? Like, has there been any type of study done, or have we?
I think that'll come forward when there's a site plan application. They'll have to generate reports as far as traffic and, what type of generation it would be for, like I said, the majority of it is 1 and 2 bedrooms.
Well, 2
But
bedrooms
nonetheless,
can still
they'll
have
generate-
3 kids in it, or 2 kids in them. You can have 2 kids in sharing a bedroom, so I mean.
Well, you can't make zoning decisions based on, you can't, have an
I was
applicant.
just curious if you
Yeah.
had any idea of how many children it was going to bring into the fold, because I would think you'd want to know that.
The only thing that I...
While you're agreeing on
The only thing that I could
settlements.
say to that is that we have taken past experience.
We have
Please, go ahead.
counted school
Yeah.
kids that come out multifamily today. And excluding the senior ones, which obviously don't have school kids, we've found that what comes today overall for the town, it varies depending upon the number of bedrooms, it varies depending upon whether it's affordable housing or not affordable housing. But overall for the township, excluding senior apartments, multifamily generates 0.13 school children for every unit. So what that comes out to is slightly fewer, that you need slightly more than 7 units to get 1 school children. So if you had 70
But
units,
for affordable units, right,
affordable generates more.
it generates more because you have to have a
But that
certain amount of
includes the
people to fill the
that's
bedrooms.
overall.
It's an average.
That includes the affordable and the market rate.
Okay.
So if you were to look at affordables, it would be somewhat higher than 0.14. If you look at the market rate, it would be lower than that. But the average, and again, most of the multifamily in Hanover Township has an affordable component to it. Some of it's all
understand.
affordable, some is none. But on average, that average that I cited includes affordable units.
But
as
we
well.
haven't done a specific study for this
Well, we
development.
don't know the precise bedroom mix, the number of units, how they're going to be phased, and all that sort of thing. So it's difficult to say. But if you could just take the number of units and multiply that times 0.13 for a rough estimate.
Okay, so 0.13, okay, so let's say you get to the point where you're planning and they come up with their plan. Do you agree on this pilot program prior to the plan, and you've seen all the studies and how many kids this is going to bring in? Or
There will be a redevelopment agreement before any site plan, and that redevelopment agreement would cover a pilot beforehand.
So is the town,
How the town spends the money is up to the town.
but is the town considering the, I just want to be clear, I mean, I think that even if you're saying that it's going to be 200 kids, which I think it's going to be more than that, that's a whole school.
Oh, wait,
And
I don't think he's
understand-
saying it's 200 kids.
No.
Well,
It's
you
a
did, you
public
said at
meeting.
the last meeting that
No,
you
that
estimated it
wasn't-
would be 200 kids.
I said that, and it wasn't for River Park. It was for all of the housing development that was proposed as part of our settlement with the
So under
court.
957 units, you think there's going to be less than 200 kids that come out of that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
At that ratio, just a quick math, about 130.
Okay, so 130 is still almost a school.
Over 12 grades, that comes out to about 11 children per
You're
grade.
assuming it's going to be over 12 grades.
But, we're talking about what that 1.13 ratio was children going to both the elementary, middle, and high school.
I just
That's
want to
12
make
grades.
sure that the town council is keeping in mind that these schools are going to need additional funding to A, educate the additional amount of children that are coming in, and B, make any expansions necessary to fit these kids, whether it's in grammar school, middle school, or high school. And if you pilot out this entire program, the school does not, by law, have to get a penny of that. So I just want to make sure that you guys are considering this and considering the impact it has on my kids' education as well as my taxes, because if the pilot isn't going to pay for these additional children, it's going to come out of my taxes. And I've still got 13 years of school for my kids. I still have kindergarten through 12th grade. I would like them to get the education that I paid for, buying into this town to get. And I just want to make sure, I feel very unsure. You guys also talked about the school sizes and compared the school sizes now compared to the 70s, 80s when we had a larger population of people. But what we failed to talk about at the last meeting was there was 4 grammar schools back then, now there's only 3, and that the middle school has now, about 1/3 of it has been taken over by the board offices. So there's even less class space there now than there was back then. So when we talk about the fact that our schools fit these children in back then, there's been significant changes made to the schools since then, so there's fitting less. And I just want to make sure that you guys take that into effect and take that into consideration when you are hammering out all this pilot stuff before you even have a drawing, because that comes first.
Linda, I just want to respond to that quickly, and we all understand how complicated it is, and we did spend a very long time on this. But as far as the schools, even when I ran for the Board of Education for the first time, I said if it's the K through 8 budget, the high school budget, the fire district budget, the municipal budget, I'm paying for all of it because we're taxpayers. So if you look at the big number on what we actually pay to run Hanover Township with everything all in, it's a lot of money. The communication is very, very good, especially in the last year or so with our meetings with the state and with the fair share and with the code. The one thing I will tell you is the advantage to having this kind of crisis is you have to look for new solutions. And we do have to decide how we divvy up the pilot. And as the liaison, co-liaison with Mr. Cahill, I speak to Mr. Wasco at least once a week. And after every large, high-level meeting, I spoke to Mr. Wasco, standing on the front porch at Town Hall, and Carol Grossi a lot. And I've already started talking to Carol, who's the new superintendent at high school. They also do studies on how many children they think they're going to get. Now, I know from my mother teaching here, they didn't build a classroom in Hanover Township since 1979 and 80, and I think Committeeman Cahill, didn't you say you were in a trailer at one point?
Trailers at Memorial.
So we are very concerned about the kids coming in, but there is also going to be money coming in, and if, with pilots, if we get to decide how to divvy it up, which we do, right, Fred?
Yes, you do.
There is absolutely no way that I'm going to allow our schools to be hit with this type of tax increase, because you know what? If the school tax goes up and ours doesn't, me as a resident, my taxes went up. So we have a different form of balance here because it's a new crisis. And we did sit, and when I went over police, DPW, fire, schools, and especially schools, because my family are all educators except me and my brother, we were told that's progress.
Oh.
And the progress that is so wonderful to the state is a problem for us.
No, I understand that, and I know it is what it is. We have to build the units. I'm past it. Let's, build them and move on. I just want to make sure that everybody in this room is on board with making sure, why Hanover Township is so great. Low taxes, great schools, right? That's why we all live here. That's why everybody who grew up here moves back. So let's just make sure that we're all on the same page, that we want that to continue.
So
I guess
just
that's
want
like
to
the
assure you,
point.
I mean, as Ace said, we both served on the Board of Education. Ace for 6 years, I believe. I was on for 9 years. The children and the education of our children in this town are a top priority to us. It always will be. Those discussions do occur. To Ace's point, we have to find kind of out-of-the-box solutions to this dilemma that we're in. And it is a dilemma, right? I mean, we've established over the past 7 months that this is a court-ordered mandate that we managed to negotiate down. It's going to bring about challenges and issues around all sorts of services, particularly education, but we're there. We completely are behind what goes on in education. We've been in those meetings, in those Board of Ed meetings, and we've seen, how they deal with these challenges and their concerns. So it's not going to be anything new to us, and it certainly is not anything that's going to be forgotten or by any means ignored.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be coming to visit you guys more often this year to make sure we stay honest with it.
One more point about traffic. I live in the section of Whippany that's going to be affected by the development down on Parsippany Road and Eden Lane and all of that. I don't make believe there's not a traffic problem either. We went to the vet yesterday, and I sat on Whippany Road for 25 minutes. So I'm not going to say there's not a traffic problem, and I'm not going to say that we don't discuss this. And we know where the traffic is coming sometimes. We know sometimes there's an accident. But largely, you cannot drive on Whippany Road. And we're also well aware of that. And like we've said before, and I've said to you, we're all available all the time. This is a new problem. It's a big problem. And I believe we're doing the absolute best we can. And keep in touch. Keep in touch.
Well, that
And if you
rolls
can't
me
make
into
this
my
meeting,
other
I'd suggest that
question.
you go down to the state legislators' meetings and voice your concerns there, because guess who's
Do you
doing
want to
this?
watch my 5-year-old twins while I do that? Because, Mike's like, bring them over.
Then you can't make it. But my point
I'll drop
is,
them off. I
that's
didn't
who's
know how
doing
to
it
ring the
us.
doorbell.
That's
so.
all I'm saying.
I do have a couple of other questions, which your traffic led into. I know that the police are understaffed based on the 1990s report that you guys did, and now we're like 25 years out on that. So where are we with increasing our police department? And where are we going to get the money to do
With our
that?
staffing?
Staffing,
Our
yeah.
current staffing?
I mean,
So
we've
you
got
know-
considerable building in the last 25 years. We have all these, multi-unit facilities coming in, right? So we've got 5 cops on duty at one time, 3 are usually patrolling. You have traffic on Whippany Road where it's taking 25 minutes to get through. Obviously, we need to make sure that, we have the police officers to man all these additional dwellings as well as the ones that we have. So have you guys been discussing how you're going to, increase the police department? At some point, we're going to need a full-time fire department. I would imagine it's not going to just be able to rely on volunteers. The more we build, the more we're going to need, 24-hour paid people there. The Whippany side of town doesn't have ambulances with all this traffic. I had to call the ambulance for my parents this summer. It took well over 15 minutes for it to get there on a Sunday night of a holiday. So, these are all other things that I'm just asking, are you talking about? Where are you at with it? What are you doing?
Yes. Absolutely.
And how are
so
you
as
going to
far
make
as
all of that
police are
happen with everything under pilot, where it's going to be even less money coming into the town?
So you're talking about...
I don't think a pilot means
Yeah.
less money. I don't agree with you, because
Okay.
a pilot's based on the gross revenues.
But the gross
If the rents
revenues-
go up on that location,
Is it the gross revenues, or is it like what they get after, like, they take out their
no, good
depreciation
news.
and all their expenses?
No, it's the gross revenues, no deductions, gross.
Okay.
And if the rents go up for the market units, the pilot payment goes up.
Okay.
And just so you know, the town has, this year, there's, this time of year, the additional ratables that are put on the books is probably somewhere north of $10 million for commercial properties this year. 55% of that goes to the school. All
I'm
of
still
those
more concerned
ratables,
about all of the
zero
development of
school
housing.
children. So you can't just say.
But we have 950
No, but wait,
units
you
coming
can't
in
just
that
say
are
it
gonna
one
have
way.
school children.
You're making a statement like the town is somehow not taking into consideration the school kids, and it is. And that's another example. All of those revenues go to the school, zero school kids. So I'm trying to tell you to feel better that that's a positive.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody up here is on page, and that you guys are doing something, and that you're talking about it, and that it's in your ear.
We discuss it almost at every meeting, and if not multiple times. And to your point, we are looking to the future. One of the items on the agenda tonight is the loan for the fire department and backing that with our promise. That firehouse has made provisions. That's why everybody, it's so big. It's so big because you're planning for the next 100 years. That was the saying back when it started many years ago. So you're asking what we're doing? Yeah, it's constantly being talked about. And there are provisions for a first aid, for an ambulance to be set over there. Eventually, it's going to be needed. We've done studies. When I was a fire commissioner for 8 years, we did studies. It wasn't time at that point, we weren't ready for it, but we're planning for it. So yes.
This is a major milestone, that when we get ourselves moved into that firehouse, then we can begin addressing those issues. We'll
And
have the
you're
space.
also addressing police?
And
Yeah.
so let's go back. Let's
We
go
just-
back
how many
to a
police
couple
do we
years
have on
ago,
this year?
right? I mean, we had 28. We added police. We've got 32 now,
Okay.
and it's a discussion every budget session. Now, last budget there were other priorities, but clearly, as the community grows and as this development, which by the way is not going to go up all in one day, so
I understand that.
fair. So we'll certainly be planning for it, and as that housing goes up and as the township grows, the levels of police force will have to grow with it, and therefore becomes a priority. So we're at much better levels now than we were years and years ago. So and we plan on continuing that. So
And across the board, we're looking at it from the recreation, we're improving our parks, we're improving our playgrounds, we're talking about an additional field, we're saving money for that additional field. Again,
Just don't cut down trees to make those
well, we
additional
can't build it on
fields.
top
Find
of the
an open
trees, so we
space
probably
already.
take a few down. So, but yeah, it's obviously we're planning. That's
Okay.
what we do.
Well, there's more important things. So thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it. I know I went well over my normal 4 minutes, but I will see you guys soon. I appreciate everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Floor remains open. Anyone else like to address the Township Committee at this time? Seeing none? Hearing none? Motion to close?
Motion to keep open.
Wait,
Oh, I'm sorry.
We have a late
No, nothing today.
person.
Appreciate it. Douglas Seaman, 48 Washington Ave, which, might I add, might be the worst paved street in town. Just want to make that point. Have had several complaints from neighbors that they've raised it up, and it's still not on the engineering team's report for being paved. So before I get into that. So tonight, I wrote my comments here based off of what I had seen from the last town council meeting for what was posted on YouTube. Fortunately, I wasn't able to stay the entire time as I had to watch my 5-year-old daughter that night. So while I appreciate comments as well, attending state legislature meetings, as with Linda, that's not always possible for all of us. But at the same time, that is also why we elect a town council and a mayor to be the voice for us at those meetings. Thank you. So I'd like to cover 3 items tonight. So the first being the analysis that was performed to assess the impact of Pine Plaza and River Park developments. Next, transparency and what information is made available to the public. And then lastly, how the pilot dollars will be spent, which Linda had touched on as well. So first, in my opinion, there appears to be a lack of due diligence on quantifying the impact of these developments on our infrastructure and services. There also appears to be a lack of plan to maintain our current quality of life without significant tax increases. At the last town council meeting, several people asked about the traffic, and there wasn't one helpful response on the matter. Has a pro forma financial analysis been completed on these developments to determine the financial impact on our town? Has a feasibility study been completed to determine the impact on infrastructure and services? If so, are you able to share these and add transparency to the matter? Which leads me to the matter of transparency, or the lack thereof. And while I greatly appreciate the posting of agendas, minutes, automated alerts, and having the town council meeting on YouTube, which if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to catch up on everything. So that itself does not make something transparent. Transparent also means easily understood or easy to perceive or detect. As an example, Mayor, you posted on Facebook, and this is a quote, "Hanover is not accepting pilot programs. We want our schools to share in any tax income." This post was all the while Hanover Township already has a pilot development in place with the Saddlebrook development and already signed pilot agreements for River Park and Pine Plaza. This raises the question of transparency.
I dispute that quote, sir.
I appreciate that. If I can finish my comments.
Quote, I am not personally favoring pilot programs.
I'm just quoting exactly what's on Facebook. And as far as signed pilot agreements being in place, I was basing that off of comments from our township attorney at the last town council meeting, which, going back to transparency, sounds like pilot programs might not be in place. So are they in place or are they not in place? At the last town council meeting, our township attorney said the entire development, except for the commercial portion of River Park, was going to be pilot. So tonight I heard the pilot agreement hasn't been signed. It goes back to, again, transparency. So while I received my alert earlier in the week notifying me that the town is being transparent, the actions and actual information being shared seems to indicate otherwise. Which leads me to, with the lack of further analysis or insight from our town council, I'm left to derive my own assumptions on the matter, such as how many students will enter our school system from these developments. For example, the Saddlebrook Court pilot development has 78 units and approximately 42 students, or a ratio of 0.4 per students per unit. However, if you look at the total ratio for all multifamily housing developments in Hanover Township, the ratio is only 0.3 units, as you noted earlier. Again, with the lack of any public analysis or additional transparency, I'm left to extrapolate those figures to River Park and Pine Plaza and see we would potentially have 150 to 600 new students entering our school system for just River Park and Pine Plaza. Again, to share my own transparency, this is a very top-level analysis that did not get into the number of affordable housing units per development or number of bedrooms in those developments. Lastly, and most importantly for me, I'm here tonight as a father of a 5-year-old girl who moved here to Hanover Township with optimism that this is the place where I would raise my daughter and spend the rest of my life. I have no special interest in this matter other than my precious daughter and ensuring she is raised in a town where she has the opportunity to grow and develop as its past students and residents have done over the years. I do, however, have a vested interest in this matter for the next 13 years as my daughter will progress through the public school system. More importantly, my daughter has a vested interest in the matter for the rest of her life, as the education she receives today will forever have an impact on her. Considering these are pilot programs, again basing it off of comments at the last town council meeting, we are looking at a significant increase in the number of students in our school system. I have serious concerns that the residents of Hanover Township will be the ones that ultimately foot the tax bill, as I noted. I'm truly disheartened by the fact that our town representatives have yet to make a public commitment to ensuring sufficient pilot dollars will be dedicated to our public school system and ensuring our children have the same opportunity to grow and develop as its past students. I ask you tonight, are you ready to make a public commitment to ensuring sufficient pilot dollars, or tax dollars, are dedicated to our school system, ensuring our students have the same resources and class sizes as they do today? To further this, are you ready to make this commitment while also committing to cap our local tax increase to no more than 3% per year for the next 30 years, just as you have given these pilots to these developers who stand to make millions on these developments? That's all I have.
Would you like answers, or have you done your dissertation?
Absolutely. I did not know this was a back and forth. I could have given my questions ahead of time, which I will do so next time.
Well, you
if
didn't get this
prefer.
opportunity to pause and answer your question.
Based off the last town council meeting, I had 4 minutes. I was going to get my time.
Are we prepared to support our school systems through the pilot program? Answering for myself, but I hope my colleagues, the answer is yes. And the pilot programs, as I've always said, gives us that ability to control payments in lieu of tax that come to this township. Presently, nearly 50% or 50 cents on every one of your dollars goes to the schools. Pilot programs, hopefully, and I'll interpret that word hopefully in a second to you, will let us do this very same. Because we will not be paying certain dollars in other areas, we'll be able to accrue more dollars to pay pilot programs to the schools, if that case is the decision of this governing body, number one. Number two, the tax rate that we've given you in this township, or the tax you paid in this township for several years, has been zero on the municipal level. Zero. This year, 1.9, Michael?
1.7, right around there.
What, which?
Around 1.7.
1.7, under 2%. Will we like to keep it there? Certainly. Will we try to do that? Yes. Do we have good ratables in order to do it? You've heard from a council that we've added on good ratables that don't have school children, and the person now, Barclays Bank, et cetera, is one of them. And those taxes certainly are accrued and can be directed to our schools again. Have we been in touch with the schools as to what's going on with schools' population? Ongoing planning board. I distributed through the Economic Development Committee several weeks ago a form showing what the school population was from all of our high-density populations in the township. 5 of our major condominium developments. Do we use that as a baseline scale to what's happening today? To some degree, yes, because it is current. Going forward, we know that there are trends that changed with the millennials, that changed the amount of children in the household populations. Are we looking at that? Yes, as well. So we come up with rather accurate averages of schools, children that we're putting in. Are we looking at enrollment decreases and along with increases from the fair share housing issues and settlements? And I want to talk to that in a second. Yes, we have. We are looking at that. Are we committed to these settlements through the courts? Unfortunately, with fair share housing, yes. These are agreements that we have come to that are, what I'm trying to find here, Fred, is sanctioned by the courts, agreed to by the courts.
Under the court supervision.
You know, this township, this governing body's taking it on the chin in social media and every other area for what's going on in fair share housing today. Not only this community, but other communities as well and neighbors around us. Hanover Township did the best damn deal in fair share housing that any one of the surrounding communities we have. Talk to those mayors. The negotiating team that we had did a very effective job. We'll get in low and moderates. We were given a sum of 1,000 low and moderate units. That would have been nearly 5,000 market units in total, gross units in order to accommodate that on 20% set aside. Have we brought that down considerably? Not considerably, brought it down immensely in what we're doing. So I hope that answers some of your questions, but if there is something that I've left out, please.
It doesn't answer much of it. Much of it's talking about the past. I'd like to try to look towards the future. So while work may have been done, I would love to see studies. Sounds like there's a lot of talking going on. I would love to see some studies on what those impacts would be to our residents, again, to our students who honestly, is the future for all of us. Right? Linda has a 5-year-old. I have a 5-year-old. I know there was a lot more people at the last meeting.
We all have children.
I don't think anyone has questioned.
We all have children in the system.
If I can finish, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. So, I don't think anyone, from what I saw at any of the meetings, or anyone on Facebook, has questioned the tremendous job that everyone up there has done. I didn't in any of my comments. And you responded a lot about the great work that's been done. I don't think anyone's questioning that. And I think that's why people moved to Hanover Township, because they saw low taxes, good school systems, good quality of life, good opportunity for their property values to increase. I think we've been put in a situation here, and I'm not saying you didn't do a good job negotiating. Coming from a business background, there's certain analysis that should be done before signing agreements. And I think there was lack of analysis when those settlement agreements were signed to truly understand what those impacts would be to the future of Hanover Township, right? And I'm still not sure if they're pilot agreements or not. I can go back, I know what I heard, and being it's on YouTube, it was said they were pilot agreements for River Park by our township attorney, that the entire River Park was pilot with the exception of commercial. Tonight, now I hear, well, no, maybe we still have to go back and do the agreements. Again, it goes back to transparency and the impact on the future of this township, right? And Councilman Gallagher, Mahalko, I appreciate the comments from the Board of Education. I can get a true sense that you really care about the education in the town. But I would love to see some actual studies on the matter, and not a lot of talking. We're talking about this, we're talking about that. I think a lot of the residents' concerns would be eased if we actually saw a plan from the town on, all right, here's what we're forecasting. Here's a pro forma financial analysis based off of some preliminary numbers. At the last town council meeting, you showed the number of units that you were expecting to get from River Park. So if you already know those estimates, you should at least be able to come up with some figures on number of students and payment in lieu of taxes. And with respectfully, gross revenues does not include all revenues with pilot programs, all right? It doesn't include state subsidized rents, which for affordable units would not be included. Correct me if I'm wrong, there's 140 from the last town council meeting, affordable units. Those, if they're Section 8, would not be included in that number, all right? So that impacts that. And Saddlebrook Court, based off of the information that Terry published on Facebook and had a request, for Saddlebrook Court, we only get $24,000. Granted, they are all affordable housing units, right? And I don't want to, for transparency, I don't want to be like, hey, it's 24,000, 0.54 ratio on Saddlebrook. You can get 900 students. That would be misleading and using the wrong information to, get people up in arms the other way. But facts are facts. That's what Saddlebrook is. We don't get much tax dollars from that. We get a lot of students from that program. We don't get enough. Pilot dollars to support that.
You're using Saddlebrook as an example of some years ago. Saddlebrook is a housing HUD project. Saddlebrook was put in with a net amount of L&Ms so that the township did not have to build market units. I can't speak specifically to Saddlebrook because I wasn't personally involved in negotiations at that time, but I do understand very well the concept. And part of the HUD concept under the federal law was a pilot program that you're referring to, and everybody on Facebook seems to be targeting as some sort of revelation here. So, Fred, if I'm missing something on that HUD project, please.
And I'm not. Again, I said for transparency purposes, that is the extreme case, and they are all affordable housing
We meet
units.
here twice a month. The planning board meets 3 times a month. I can give you every meeting schedule going. We were on, our website covers just about every situation with plans that you'd want to see, even though that's been refuted. It's there on Facebook, it's there on our website for you to see. I don't know how this town could be any more transparent where other towns are not even equal to this. So I defend the transparency that we have. I've met you first time tonight, sir. I'm here for several years in every one of these meetings, and this room is empty. So
I heard that at the last town council meeting.
Thank you for being here, and
Mayor?
thank you for your comments, and thank you for the opportunity to address your comments.
I appreciate that, but you used that same excuse at the last meeting as a defense that because you didn't show up, your opinion kind of doesn't matter. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, graciously, I have a
very inaccurate statement.
You
That's
said
a
it at-
very
you said it at the
inaccurate
last town
statement.
council
You
meeting,
seem
Mayor.
to have an agenda, sir. I thank you very much for your remarks.
Thank you.
Would you sum up, please?
Sure, no problem. Councilman Gallagher, you were going to make a comment? think
Yeah, I did.
interrupted you.
I typically don't jump in to like a poll, but my mother did teach in Hanover Township for 30 years. I moved here because of the school system, and my children benefited from it immensely. I did teach drums in Hanover Township schools. I love these schools. I took band camp in these schools and played baseball here, even though I didn't live here. I can give anybody my word, and I was chastised in a fun way for a couple years when I became a committeeman that I'm still a Board of Education member. I don't think there's anything more important than our children and their education and their safety. So I will say, and I've said repeatedly, if we get the opportunity, which we do, to divide that pilot money into a way that would be very fair for the school, I will say on top of a mountain that I will do that, period. And, that's what I'll say to everything you said. That's something that's very important where I have to jump in. As 1/5 of this body, the entire Hanover Township has my word that I would be the last guy to leave the schools high and dry, period.
Thank you.
I think that there's nobody who's sitting on this dais that has ever done anything that negatively impacted the schools. In fact, we go way out of our way to communicate with the schools in terms of information. Let's go back, since you wanted to raise an issue of what something happened several years ago, and let's talk about the Horse Hills Road project. The Horse Hills Road project, we evaluated, sir, the upside and the downside of what it could be versus what it is. So here's some numbers to contemplate, and then you can review and think about how you would have voted on the issue. But here's the opportunity for you to think about it. Horse Hills Road project has 78 units in it. It produces, on average, somewhere between 35 to 38 students. If that weren't built, the other side of it would have been, and planner, correct me if I'm wrong, it would have been 785 total units, because we would have to use the fair share 5-to-1 ratio. So on one hand, I look at 78 units. They produce arguably 40 students, which impact the school. And on the other hand, I'm looking at 785 units that could result in 300 students. So if we look at the upside and the downside, and we evaluate the decision in terms of what's the best impact to our schools, I'd ask you to take it into consideration. And I can assure you, as a student of economics, we evaluate on this board every dollar that gets spent by this board. We look at it one way. We're spending people's money. Every dollar is an incremental spend. So I can assure you that is a very fiscally conservative operation. And I can assure you, as to what Mr. Gallagher said, that we are very supportive and we will remain supportive of our schools, and we've never demonstrated any other approach to school funding in the past that would suggest in any way, shape, or form that we would be doing something differently going forward. And that's all I can share with you, some facts on the matter.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Mayor,
Appreciate your time.
Mayor, can I just clarify a few things? For Doug, a couple things. First, I like what you said about you like where we are and how we got here.
That's why I moved
That's
here.
helpful. No, about the affordable housing, the numbers, the settlement, and I understand your point. You just want to understand what's going to happen. So I want to answer a few things. First, we have a plan, a settlement plan that includes River Park and Pine Plaza, and it includes as part of the negotiations, that there will be a pilot. But there'll be a separate meeting, and there'll be a public hearing, and there'll be a pilot, there'll be a vote. I'm going to tell you that it's going to have to be part of our plan, or else we'll have a problem with compliance with our affordable housing obligation. But there'll be a public hearing, there'll be an analysis presented, there'll be a chance to ask questions about it. And I think, I take note about your pro formas and the decision-making process. I want to explain to you, too, that this wasn't your conventional type of pro forma, because part of this whole process was we had a number order. And a lot of it was just about how we can bring that development number to a minimum. And we can bring the bedrooms to a minimum for a start. So it's not always going to be a fair analysis, but you're saying, I want to understand that. That'll come out when we have that pilot before you. What'll also come out is there's a possibility that the governing body at that time will look at an ordinance as to how it wants to allocate funds. All of that will come forward. So my point is, I appreciate what you said about where we are, because that takes a lot of the explaining. I think we've explained a lot about how we came up with the numbers as far as units. But now you're asking about the dollars, and that's going to be the next phase as we go forward. And you'll get those answers. So to be patient, because it's going to happen. And when it does, then you can make you said you're going to have to make your own conclusions. Try not to, and to wait, because I'm telling you, you'll get a lot of that information as we go forward before there's a vote on this. You'll get a lot of that, what it could have been, what it is, what a pilot means, what the projected revenues would be, and then to your question, it may be answered as well about what it means as far as allocation to the schools. I want to say one thing to try to discount the fact that there's a pilot at Pine Plaza, but it's much different than any other pilot, because
Understood.
That just has 60 units, and they're all affordable, and they're all senior.
Yep,
And so,
completely understood.
Yeah, well, but for the record, so that and that was such a high density and such a a favorable type of outcome to get us our units that I don't think you're going to ever get that type of analysis there, and it doesn't really doesn't impact the schools. So the one that will be the focus for a lot of your questions is the River Park, and there'll be a time for that, and I think we all took note, and I think we would have, at that point in time, there'll be a public hearing, and all of those questions, I hope, will be answered, if that helps.
No, I appreciate it. At the last town council, I think more of the time was spent on condemnation Pine Plaza, when from a financial standpoint, to your point, less of a financial impact from Pine Plaza as there is River Park. And that's where more of my concern comes from.
Right.
Is pilot at River Park. Is it everything excluding just commercial? And what pilot dollars will we be receiving from that development? And is it sufficient to support infrastructure, services?
And those are
most
logical.
importantly for me, education. Right? My daughter is the most important thing in my life, as with anyone here that has children as well.
But I think it was important just to get the message. It's a very complicated process to get the message across, what the obligation was, what the units are, what to expect. And that's how it brings you to your questions, because now you know what's in front of the township, and that financial aspect is yet to come. And also we're mindful of the fact that there's some things River Park has to do before we ever even reach that. That doesn't mean, to your point before, that we've discounted anything, but there's a number of steps in between, that things they have to do, and then we'll reach the point where there'll be a pilot agreement for a public hearing and consideration and analysis.
I appreciate that. If I showed up at that meeting and made my comments for the first time, I would be told that was the first time I've showed up and spoken, so I've made my points in advance. It won't be the first time or the last time that I attend a meeting, so thank you, Mayor.
Hope to see you again. Thank you.
I just want to make one comment, just to beat this to death.
Committeeman, go ahead.
Sir, I have 3 children. I have 3 children in the school, like you said, and 3 daughters also. God bless you. They're paramount. I can say, if it was not for the COA or the fair share housing, we would not be having this conversation. I oppose this vehemently. We have done everything that we possibly can to get that number down. And even we sat with the courtmaster, and she said this is probably one of the best deals she's ever seen. But it doesn't mean we don't like it. We're trying to do the best we can with what we have. And we go over this hundreds of hours, thousands of hours.
No disputing that. My challenge to all of you.
So we're there. We're with you. We live here. I plan on living
maintain
here.
that same quality of life at a low tax rate.
Yes.
And increase our property values.
Yeah.
That's
And
what my
it's a low
challenge is,
tax
with a
rate.
Focus
We,
on education.
we all live here.
Yeah.
We all raised our children here. We all raised our children here. We all pay taxes here. We're no different than you, and we fight darn hard for every dollar to keep them down because we know it's going to come out of our wallet as well. So be assured of that. That's for sure.
We are a little bit different because we're at different points in our life. I have a 5-year-old who
I have an 11-year-old.
I don't plan 13 years, right? No offense, older gentleman on the on the town council. You're at a different point in your life. If you want, you can move tomorrow and cut bait and loss. I am not saying you would do that. You're longtime residents here, but to say one person, right here, we have our interest. For me, education is paramount. I appreciate the comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Attend when I can. When I do not have my daughter, that's my time with her. More paramount than coming to a meeting. I have my grandma.
Absolutely.
Her grandma watching her.
Floor remains open. Anyone else would like to speak at this time, please do so.
This will be real quick.
Name and address for the record.
Jim Neidhart, 3414 Appleton Way, Whippany. Throughout this whole process, since the very beginning, when the public started commenting on this, I've seen a lot of the Facebook posts that have been made. I've heard a lot of the questions that were asked at the last township meeting, as well as some of the questions and comments from tonight. And I can't help thinking that a lot of the questions and the concerns and some of the angst and some of the accusations of lack of transparency come from the fact that the members of the public, or a certain percentage of the public, they get information and they get it piecemeal, and they react because they don't understand the process. The way people like yourself or people like myself who are on the Board of Adjustment, I didn't understand the process in the Board of Adjustment even after I was on it for a year. It took me a long time to really understand how the process
Some
works.
of us still have trouble with it. But
That's the way it works. But my understanding of this particular project, River Park in particular, as well as Pine Plaza, is that we were thrust into a situation where negotiation had to take place, and we tried to negotiate the best deal we could. What was agreed to in the developer's agreement was a rather broad understanding at a relatively high level. But now the specifics have to be worked out and agreed to. And a lot of the things that members of the public are assuming based on what's in the developer's agreement, they make a lot of assumptions based on that, some right and some wrong. But I think in some respects the public is out there right at the forefront because of social media. They're at the same point and sometimes ahead of you, and you're almost playing catch-up sometime in terms of answering the questions on things that haven't been decided, haven't been considered. And a good example is doing a study in terms of the school children. That sounds really nice. It sounds like the right thing to do. But in my opinion, we're not quite at that point because there's a lot of elements that are still subject to change. And do you want to spend $20,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 on a study now and then have to redo it in 6 months from now when you have more information and you're actually committing to something? There's a lot of things in these agreements, in the developer's agreement, that's not going to be finalized until after the site plan gets submitted for approval. Then some decisions have to be made. So in one respect,
Jim, I understand, even in advance of that, to try and respond to it, the township committee, the governing body, the planning board, et cetera, has advanced hypothetical figures based upon what we suppose those calculations are going to be to the boards already.
right, but you're going to learn more as you go through the process. So, I mean, my opinion is it wouldn't be appropriate to do that study previously or at this current time. You might need some more information before you can do that study. Otherwise, you're not spending the dollars efficiently. So I'm not being critical of any members of the public, and I'm not, praising you guys in this regard. I'm just saying that I think a lot of this happens because the public doesn't understand the process. And perhaps at the start of this project, the meeting that you had at the last township meeting, you guys had a lot of this information earlier. Perhaps that could have been shared earlier. And in the past, there was no need to do that. But now with social media and word getting spread immensely quickly, you probably need to be thinking going forward on how you share the process with the public a little earlier to circumvent misinformation, partial information. So even at this point, I think laying out what you believe the process is from this standpoint and what decisions will be made down the future might be very helpful to the public so that they're not coming here and accusing you of not being transparent on something or not considering something that we're not at that point in the process yet. So that's my only suggestion.
And Jim, thank you for those comments. And it's funny because that is yet another topic that is probably discussed every other week back in that room as far as what can we do. And I'll admit that I think we've made a lot of progress in the past year, 2 years, 3 years. There are some legal obstacles in some cases, but we have to be careful about what we put out there and how we put it out. And there are certain ways that we're required to by the state and that sort of thing. But believe me, every 2 weeks we're talking about that. How can we do better? And we have some ideas. And unfortunately, we're right in the middle of this as well. But look for it. I think
one of the novel things, the different things that we did do here as a township committee, and you certainly remember them, Jim, is at the near close of every meeting, we saved a portion of the agenda for council, and council gave reports every single meeting as to where we were with this fair share housing issues. Did we go into...
We started that, what, January, February?
Yeah, we kept it ongoing, and in conjunction with those remarks were repeated again on YouTube.
On the agenda.
And we decided that that's the direction we wanted to go to bring this.
And that's all good. That's really good.
But you're talking to another phase of this
I'm talking
process.
Another level because technology's changing and the way people are using it's changing, and the public is getting out there in front of you in some respects. So you really need to think about explaining the process and publishing that perhaps on the website. Not the decisions that are, you're doing the decisions that to be made, but show them what the process is coming forward.
Yeah.
So that they know that it's not time for that decision yet. When they're all assuming that you're making the wrong decision because of a paragraph that they read in the developer's report.
Well, that it's all signed, sealed, and delivered, yeah.
I think the whole approach of having an action plan with a methodology in terms of steps, phases, I think it's a good idea. I think it's a great idea, and as we have no need to withhold information from the public. We share information with the public. Everything we can share, we share, except that some information is, as you know, Jim, it's legal, it's confidential. We can't.
Or you're negotiating.
Yeah.
And you can't talk about the negotiations because that ruins the negotiation. And people say, well, how come we didn't know you were negotiating this? Well, because you're not supposed to know it. But the members of the public, many members of the public, don't understand that. And I think where we are in 2019, I know you guys are busy doing a lot of things, but you really got to think about the communication strategy. I don't think it's a transparency thing. I've come to a lot of these meetings. I'm on the Board of Adjustment. I've come to some of your work sessions in the back, the ones that I think are important when I can make it. I don't have a problem with trusting you guys. Everybody on this board, I know you. I've observed you for years. I trust everything that you're doing. And I don't really believe there's an intention not to be transparent. But perceptions can develop around motivations or transparency if people don't understand the process. So my only suggestion is really think about sharing more about the process on what's going to unfold and when certain decisions are going to be made. And I think that'll
Almost have
circumvent
like an
a
outline.
lot of the
Almost have like an
misinformation.
outline set up. You know, we were in negotiation before, and now we're into court approval.
Phases.
You know, phasing it out, and you're saying physically put that down. It's not a bad idea. It's a good
A
idea.
little roadmap, a little
Yeah, a little roadmap.
diagram,
Here we
what
are.
happens, the dates, you know, along the
Yeah.
timeline, and the key decisions to be made at that point. I think it would be helpful.
Good idea.
You're going to get a lot more suggestions and recommendations, but it'll be worse than accusations of
Well, not at all.
non-transparency
Right. It's
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
and trust and the things like that. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Floor remains open.
Hi, Laura O'Brien, 33 Sunset Drive. I have concerns, obviously, so I just want to make it known that I have concerns. I'm not going to go too crazy because you've already have delved into a lot of it, so I won't do that to you guys. Having said that, I actually have some concerns about the nuisance law. I want to start out by saying I think what you guys are trying to do is wonderful, so I come from a supportive stance. I also come from the stance of I used to be a pharmacist in town. One of the things that concerns me is the limits as a pharmacist. It is very easy when you get a prescription that you find out to be fraud to rip it up and have it disappear and just say, I'm not filling it, it's fake. I always went the extra step because I felt it helped people to call the police and make a report and if possible have them arrested for a few reasons. One, prevent it from drugs getting onto the streets to our kids. Two, maybe I help someone reach rock bottom and they get help for themselves. If, as a business, I was going to be charged, you know, that concerns me. We unfortunately, and I don't know that everyone realizes this, Route 10 is a lot of pharmacies. And I don't think it's as problematic as now, because wonderfully, New Jersey has gone electronic prescribing for a lot of things, and that has reduced fraudulent prescriptions a lot. But I still do get them. I don't work in town anymore. I don't know what the townships gets anymore. And I guess that concerns me. If I chose to work in town again, it's just something to consider that for small corporations would probably still do it, but if there was to be a small business pharmacy, that might affect decision making. If it, you know, there's not a whole lot of profit in pharmacy anymore, and that could make a difference in whether people decide to go to the police with something. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Floor remains open. Hearing none? Seeing none? Motion to close?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Administrator.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have the approval of the Township Committee regular minutes of July 11th and the regular minutes of August 8th, 2019. May we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A motion? Second. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher?
Aye.
Mr. Faramasca?
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko?
Yes.
Mr. Cahill?
Aye.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. We have one item of communication, and it reads as follows. It's addressed to Mayor Ronald F. Francioli and members of the Township Committee, and it reads, "Gentlemen, it is with mixed feelings that I submit this letter to formally retire from my position of Assistant to the CFO of Hanover Township. My official last day working in the office will be Friday, September 20th, 2019, and with my vacation accrued, will formally retire on October 15th, 2019. Respectfully submitted, Patricia Shea." May we have a motion to accept the letter of retirement?
So moved reluctantly.
Motion?
Yeah.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Letter of retirement is accepted. On departmental reports, we have the following. We have the township engineer has submitted his letter of all capital projects status report as of September 12th. The township's chief municipal finance officer in his capacity as treasurer submitted two reports, one as of August the 6th and the second as of the 11th of September. The chief of police submitted two reports for all activities conducted by the police department during the months of July and August. Superintendent of Public Works, Buildings and Grounds, and Park Maintenance submitted 2 reports for all activities, programs, and projects conducted during the month of July and August. And finally, the construction officials submitted 3 reports for all construction permit activity, including issuances of certificates of occupancy for the months of June, July, and August. And all those reports are available for public inspection in the Office of the Business Administrator, Township Clerk. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we continue with the next portion of business, public hearing and consideration on adoption of ordinances. We have 2 ordinances that are related. The first is ordinance of the Township Committee accepting annexation of a portion of Block 200, Lot 1.2 in the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills. That ordinance and the notice of introduction was published in the July 17th issue of the Daily Record. It was also filed with the Morris County Office of Planning and Preservation. The second related ordinance is ordinance number 32-2019, and that's an ordinance of the Township Committee amending Section 166-108, the map, schedule, and appendices in Article 18 for districts, the map and schedule of Chapter 166 of the Code, entitled Land Use and Development Legislation, in order to amend the zoning map to reflect a proposed change in the municipal boundary with the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills. That ordinance, too, was published in full with the notice of introduction in the July 17th issue of the Daily Record. It was also filed with the Morris County Office of Planning and Preservation. And we'll note for the record that in accordance with the municipal land use law, the ordinance, including Ordinance 28-2019, both ordinances were referred to the Planning Board for recommendation. Now, on Ordinance 32-2019, which is a land use ordinance, the Planning Board only responded to that ordinance as a land use ordinance, and I'm going to read into the record their letter. It's a letter dated August 13. Dear Mr. Giorgio, at its August 13, 2000 meeting, the Planning Board reviewed and discussed ordinance number 32-2019, which have been referred to the Board by the Township Committee as required by the municipal land use law at NJSA 40:55D-26A. Ordinance 32-2019, if adopted, would do the following. 1. Recognize a change in the municipal boundary with the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, currently pending as Ordinance 28-2019. And 2. Amend the zoning map to designate a portion of land to be annexed to the Township of Hanover pursuant to Ordinance 28-2019 as being in the IP zone district. In reviewing Ordinance 32-2019 for consistency with the master plan, the Planning Board has determined that the ordinance is not substantially consistent with the master plan, since the master plan reflects the current municipal boundary with Parsippany Troy Hills. Despite this inconsistency, the Planning Board recommends that if Ordinance 28-2019 is adopted, the adoption of Ordinance 32-2019 is appropriate for the following reasons. 1. The land that would be annexed to Hanover Township by Ordinance number 28-2019 is owned and developed in common with property identified as Block 303, Lot 13 and 14 on the tax map of the Township of Hanover. And 2, Block 303, Lots 13 and 14 are currently located within the IP Industrial Park District. Finally, The board notes that Block 303, lots 13 and 14, are currently designated as an area in need of redevelopment, and that a redevelopment plan has been adopted for the area. If Ordinance 28-2019 is adopted, the board recommends that designation of the annexed land as an area in need of redevelopment be considered, and if so, designated that the current redevelopment plan be amended to include the annexed land and to remove the land to be de-annexed. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on Ordinance 32-2019. Very truly yours, Gene Pinadella, on behalf of the Planning Board. So because these two ordinances, 28-2019 and 32-2019, are related, I will now entertain a motion to convene the public hearing on both ordinances so that any member of the public wishing to speak on either or both ordinances will be given the opportunity to do so
I'll move it.
in accordance with law.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Faramasca, seconded by Mr. Gallagher. On roll call for the public hearing for ordinances 28-2019 and 32-2019. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramasca.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Is there anyone in chambers wishing to be heard on either or both ordinance 28-2019 or 32-2019? If so, please step to the microphone and give your name and address for the record.
Motion to close.
Seeing none, hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Francioli to close the public hearing on both ordinance 28-2019 and 32-2019. We have a second by Mr. Cahill. On roll call to close the public hearing on both ordinances, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramasca.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Now, we'll take separate votes on both ordinances for adoption. First is ordinance 28-2019. Be it resolved that an ordinance entitled, An Ordinance of the Township Committee of the Township of Hanover and the County of Morrison, State of New Jersey, accepting annexation of a portion of Block 200, Lot 1.2 in the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, be adopted. Be it further resolved that the ordinance shall be notice of adoption published in the Daily Record in accordance with law. So at this time, may we have a motion on adoption for ordinance 28-2019?
I'll make a motion and comment along with that motion. A little bit of background as to what's taking place so that, add a little context to this. Part of the analysis the township had to go through was to do an evaluation as to whether it wanted to participate in an exciting plan that Parsippany is entertaining at 1515 Route 10. That exciting plan is a mixed-use plan. There'll be opportunities for living, working, and play at that location. This township committee elected to forego participation in that 1515 development. And the reason this township committee elected, primarily the reason not to participate in that plan, was its concern for school-age children impact. So because of that, we worked closely with the Township of Parsippany to allow them to move forward, to perfect its plan, move forward into the application with the developer. And Hanover will be swapping property with Parsippany, and that piece of property that Hanover will swap will go through our own zoning to make a determination on that. So I want to give a little background on it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Faramasca. Mr. Faramasca has made the motion for adoption of ordinance number 28-2019. We have a second by Mr. Francioli. Now on the vote for adoption. Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramasca.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
So adopted, and once again, the notice of adoption will appear in the September 18th issue of the Daily Record pursuant to law. Now on the adoption of ordinance number 32-2019, which is the companion ordinance. This is an ordinance of the Township Committee of the Township of Hanover in the County of Morrison, State of New Jersey, amending Section 166-108, the map and schedule of Chapter 166 of the Code of the Township, entitled Land Use and Development Legislation, in order to amend the zoning map to reflect a proposed change in the municipal boundary with the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills. The notice of adoption for this ordinance will be published in full in the Daily Record on the 18th of September in accordance with law. So may we now have a motion on adoption?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Fermaska on adoption of 32-2019.
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Mahalko. On roll call for adoption, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Fermaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill. And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
So adopted on ordinance 32-2019, the companion measure to 28-2019. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we continue on page 2 of your agenda. For ordinance number 33-19, this is an ordinance of the Township Committee of the Township of Hanover in the County of Morrison, State of New Jersey, establishing a new Chapter 180 under Part 2, General Legislation of the Code of the Township of Hanover, entitled Nuisance Properties, Excessive Utilization of Municipal Services, by regulating and establishing penalties for the utilization of such services. And before the Township Committee entertains a motion to convene the public hearing, a member of Mr. Samrow's firm, or maybe it'll be Mr. Samrow himself, would like to give some remarks into the record on the intention of the ordinance. And we'll ask Mr. Reismietzel, an associate of Mr. Samrow, to step forward and introduce himself and make his remarks on this ordinance.
Thanks,
Thank you.
I'm Rob Rossmissel. I'm with Fred Semrow's law firm, the Town Council. It was brought to our attention by the chief not long ago that there are some properties in the township that are utilizing a lot more public services than other properties. This, actually, to go back a few speakers to Linda, who made a comment shortly ago about concerns regarding the township's public services in general and how the township is addressing, potential issues there. And actually, for the record, I think Hanover Township is known to have generally pretty good public services. This actually shows the township's concern. The chief came to us and basically noted that there are a couple of properties in town that are basically being called upon by the police, by other departments of the township very disproportionately. I think everybody would accept that the idea of public services is that basically all residents, all businesses pay their fair share and utilize their fair share of services. If you have to have the police come to your property for a particular reason, or the fire department, I think that's something that is to be expected. But there are some, just to give an idea of the nature of the disproportionate use of public services by some of these properties, and the chief actually provided a statement that Fred from our firm is going to read in a moment. But so I kind of usurp this a little bit. But there are, and from January of 2017 through the present, the Hanover Police Department was involved in 288 possession of controlled substance arrests, 171 domestic violence arrests or incidents, 19 aggravated assault incidents, and 92 simple assault incidents. 12% of all of these incidents were related to 2 properties in the township. So basically, there are a couple of properties in the township where the police department is spending an inordinate amount of time. What this ordinance basically does is it essentially, it's not going to cut off anybody's services, but it essentially sets kind of a quota for how many calls you can have to your property in a particular in a certain set of time before you basically have to recompensate the township for the services that you're using. And it's not limited to police visits to your property. These calls can be basically public health calls by the fire department. Some of the qualifying calls include violations of ordinances concerning the sale, service, or consumption of alcoholic beverages, disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace, littering or excessive noise, damage to property or injury to a person, improperly parking a vehicle on your property. There are a number of others. Basically, the ordinance is going to establish certain standards. So, say it's going to set aside these standards so that if in a consecutive 60-day period, a particular property utilizes more than, like, has the police visit, let's say, it sets the standards based upon the type of property. So, for example, if for residential properties in the township, it's not anything that any resident is going to have to be really concerned about. That's just that is utilizing service on any kind of normal basis. If you have a house in the township, you would have to have the police visit your house basically more than 8 times in 60 consecutive days before the ordinance would kick in. For other types of properties, there are different levels. For multi-family dwelling in motels, if there are 5 through 40 dwelling units, you'd have to have 40 calls to the property before the ordinance would kick in. And it goes on and on like that. If you're a convenience grocery or liquor store, you'd have to have more than 10 qualifying calls in 60 consecutive days to have to kick in. If the ordinance kicks in with regard to your property, basically you're going to be cited, you're going to be issued a notice, and at that point, for every qualifying call for the next calendar year, or for the next 12 consecutive months, you'll be assessed a fee of $500, increasing by $100 per call. You'll get a hearing in court. You won't have to pay any. You won't have to pay any of these fines until the municipal judge actually finds that you have indeed exceeded the quota of the particular calls for your property in the 60 consecutive day period. But basically, the nature of this, it's going to, for the properties that really are problem actors in the township and are utilizing far more, or an extremely disproportionate amount of public services, they're ultimately going to have to pay a fine to the township for each call after a certain set of calls for a particular amount of time. So ideally, what it'll do is it'll either curb the behavior that's requiring the township to respond to these properties so constantly, or alternatively, it will force the properties to pay their fair share rather than having the entire township basically shoulder the costs for the excessive services that are being provided for a few properties. So that's kind of the nature of the ordinance in general. I think the committee will have something to say about it also. And I welcome any questions also if anybody has any.
Thank you, Robert. Fred, did you have any other comments?
Yes, the only thing I'd like to add is just to read it into the record, Mayor, because it's important that the record reflects a statement by the Chief of Police who worked with Robert on this ordinance, and he recommends the ordinance, and he couldn't be here this evening, so he would like this statement to be read as part of the record. So if we have to look back and identify whether or not there was an endorsement by the head of public safety, there is. And the statement is as follows. As Chief of Police and head of public safety in Hanover Township, I am advising the Township Committee that the ordinance before you this evening is one which will support the health, welfare, and safety of the residents of our community. I say this for several reasons. Our police department is prepared 24 hours, 7 days a week to respond to calls of residents and visitors at hotels, shopping centers, homes, and on the roadways within the township. However, there are certain locations, although not common to Hanover, but they have repeated responses and require repeated police visits to address serious public safety concerns such as crime, drugs, violence, illegal weapons, and domestic disputes. Although these calls are not part of the police department's day-to-day regular calls, there are still a few locations where these calls are persistent and where preventative security measures should be but are not being provided. This leaves Hanover Township in the position to constantly police these locations. These locations require additional demands on the police department and threatens the department's ability to make decisions regarding other preventative or public safety responsibilities. If we were to apply this ordinance to the township police calls over the last year, there is a possibility that 2 locations would be affected. Over the past year, these 2 locations would have had the requisite number of calls in this proposed ordinance to the police department to have resulted in additional charges or assessments. These additional charges provided in this ordinance would serve 2 purposes. First, it would encourage property owners to undertake appropriate public safety precautions and measures to protect the general public, as well as law enforcement and first responders of the township who have been injured in these places as a result of the repeated dangerous calls. Second, it would appropriately place the financial responsibility and the cost that Hanover Township and its taxpayers are incurring to provide these public safety measures on a repeated basis. The law already provides that businesses, schools, contractors, or utilities that have special events or projects pay for necessary law enforcement services. In this case, repeated incidents and calls at certain properties are placing extraordinary demands on the police department and also deserve the financial support of the property owner. Statistically, in Hanover Township, as mentioned, from January of 2017 through today, the police department was involved in the following number of incidents: 288 possession of controlled dangerous substances arrests, 171 domestic violence incidents, 19 aggravated assault incidents, 92 simple assault incidents. 2 properties in Hanover Township accounted for approximately 12% of all these incidents. The township and its taxpayers should not support establishments that fail to provide adequate security and protection and place a drain on the first responders instead of establishing proactive security and safety measures. This ordinance will not in any way cause or create a financial obligation for those establishments, residents, or incidents that we routinely address. This ordinance concerns the repeat offender, and in this case, it is these property owners who are jeopardizing the health, safety, and welfare of the general public and our first responders, who want the township to be more than just a responder, but a security provider. It is these establishments that are addressed in this ordinance, and I would request that the mayor and township committee consider the adoption and enactment of this ordinance. Chief Roddy.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay, as we continue, ladies and gentlemen, ordinance number 33-2019. Now we have the public hearing. The ordinance was published in full with the notice of introduction in the August 30th issue of the Daily Record pursuant to law. And at this time, may we have a motion to convene the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Francioli, seconded by Mr. Gallagher. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Aye.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Is there anyone present wishing to be heard concerning ordinance number 33-2019? Your name and address for the record, please.
Jim Neidhart, 3414 Appleton Way. Mr. Mayor, perhaps you could have the township attorney answer this question. My question is, have other townships within the state had similar ordinances passed, and have they been codified by case law?
To answer your question, good question. Our township administrator raised the issue that he identified that the township of Toms River had a similar ordinance. and the chief of police thought that by addressing this concern, by going in this direction, would be a very good posture to take. In Toms River, we spoke to the former administrator because he retired, and he said that the ordinance was very effective, and it actually, in that particular case, a troubled business that did not cooperate ended up leaving the township, and overall, he thought that it was highly recommended ordinance. I cannot say there's any case law, but nonetheless, Robert and the chief and myself, we've gone through the legalities to make this consistent with a nuisance type of ordinance and to give a lot of the safeguards. There's a public hearing, there's a hearing that they can have before the municipal court judge and things of that nature, so it's to prevent and have safeguards. So we think from a legal standpoint, that in conjunction with the fact that the chief of public safety, the head of public safety, supports this for the health and safety reasons, that we think it would be something that would sustain a legal challenge.
Okay, great. And my second question, your associate had given some examples of limits for residences and for convenience and liquor stores and for multi-family units such as hotels. And the ones on the residence and the liquor store convenience seemed kind of reasonable. Just on the surface, as somebody that hasn't been involved in this, the number of 40 for a motel, hotel, seems like an exceptionally high number, and I was wondering how that number was determined and why it was not a much lower number.
Well, I think, I'll try, and Robert can certainly chime in, but the chief gave us some data that he looked at historically, so that, within reason, these numbers coincide with the fact that there are incidents when you have, hotels and things of that nature, because you mentioned the hotel. But nonetheless, if we went over 40 qualifying calls in a 60-day period, it may very likely happen. It does happen in particular instances, and he thought that that was a fair number, that it was within reason. He took a statistical background, if I correct, Robert.
I'll add to that the 40 qualifying calls for a particular hotel, that's a hotel with over 200 units, so it's a pretty sizable hotel, and smaller hotels have a smaller limit. And actually, the way the ordinance is set up, I don't think that the purpose is necessarily to net. It's basically, most people are using services with a reasonable limit. I think the chief pointed out, this was, I believe, the letter that Fred read, that basically if we were to apply this retroactively, there would basically be 2 properties that it would have affected over the past year. And I think I'll respond to your question by saying that I think the numbers were crafted very consciously. And I think that if you're, generally, if your uses are reasonable, you're probably not going to be caught up in this. And it was based on the past experience, the number of calls that the police department specifically, but a number of departments in the township were making, on which the numbers in the ordinance were based. And so, we'll see what that does going forward should the ordinance pass. But I think the 40 qualifying calls, I think that was determined by Chief Roddy in concert with us, looking at other townships, looking at the calls that are typically made to a property that size. That was determined to be, the best answer I can give you is that was determined to be a reasonable number retroactively.
So if the properties that are, I'll call them the high offenders, the ones that use a disproportionate amount of services, perhaps to 2 that are probably what were some of the things that were considered in recommending this ordinance, would the additional fees that these properties would have to pay if they continued their same level of requirements for our services, are those substantial enough to motivate those property owners to provide their own security?
We think so. And that's actually a good part of my discussion with the chief. This has been an ongoing process. I've been talking about this. He's been excellent, by the way, really helpful. and he kind of was the main motivator for us to push this forward. And I'll just say that, the number that we put together was, again, very consciously crafted. It's if you exceed the number of calls in the consecutive 60-day period, the per call fee is $500, increasing by $100 per call.
Okay.
So it begins to add up pretty quickly. And actually, I don't know that I necessarily got to this in my review of the ordinance, but what ultimately will happen is after 60 days, if you have a fee assessed against you and you haven't paid it, it's going to turn into a regular municipal lien, like if you weren't to pay your water bill or something like that. So if these properties, if the fees just add up and add up, and they neglect to pay them, it's going to be a lien on which ultimately, theoretically, the township could foreclose on. So
But would the lien be against the business or the property owner?
It would be against the property owner.
Okay.
And so we think that, I think putting something together like this is just, it's a very delicate process because you don't want to be too aggressive.
Right.
You don't have to ensnare anybody who's just a good law-abiding citizen, who has, the standard number of calls, hopefully none. But basically, we think that there are enough teeth in this ordinance that it's going to deter certain actors in the township that become problematic, and then anybody else that rises to that level at some point. So,
Okay.
and then also while leaving everybody else be and not really, we don't think it will incidentally ensnare anybody that is basically that isn't causing a problem for the township at the moment. That's how they put it.
I appreciate your thorough answer, and also you made a very nice presentation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to be heard on ordinance 33-2019? Your name and address for the record.
Laura O'Brien, 33 Sunset Drive. Just one thing I heard was that health checks were included. I don't think any healthcare facility in town has ever come close to the limit, so I don't think anyone's going to get ensnared, but perhaps has anyone thought about excluding businesses whose primary source of business is healthcare, the doctor's offices? We have 2 urgent cares in town. We have 2 pharmacies in town from health checks, because a lot of people in this day and age of high cost of healthcare, I know will go to an urgent care or a pharmacy first. I know I called in my pharmacy just the other month, a woman who came to my pharmacy for stomach pain, and I can't say 100%, but I sent her out in an ambulance, and I'm pretty sure her appendix burst. So I know this is what we get nowadays. So while I don't think I've never been any close to the limits, but it could happen, and I have no idea what's walking in my door, and perhaps something, just a common sense thing like health checks could be excluded for businesses, doctor's offices, pharmacies, urgent care facilities, that sort of thing.
Thank you. Take it up with the Board of Health.
I'll respond to that by saying that I think that's a great point. And when I discussed this with the chief and actually putting it together, we took into account certain issues that we thought could become issues. Healthcare facilities, also seniors and senior facilities. There were certain things that obviously, just by the nature of what they are going to require a lot of calls. And what I can say is that in my conversations with the chief, I got a lot of assurances that, as written, this is not going to ensnare those kind of properties. So
I'm pretty sure based on my presentations of the police that I would never come close to a quota. But
it's a great point regardless.
You never know, you can have a bad month, so, and it's,
But I think just for clarification too, a first aid type call or a medical type of an emergency is not a qualifying call. So, in the ordinance.
Anyone else wishing to comment on ordinance 33-2019? Seeing none, hearing none, may we have a motion to close the public hearing? We have a motion by Mr. Faramasca. Second by Mr. Francioli. On roll call to close the public hearing, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramasca.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalka.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Now, in adoption, be it resolved that an ordinance entitled, An Ordinance of the Township Committee of the Township of Hanover in the County of Morrison, State of New Jersey, establishing a new Chapter 180 under Part 2, General Legislation of the Code of the Township of Hanover, entitled Nuisance Properties, Excessive Utilization of Municipal Services, by regulating and establishing penalties for the utilization of such services, be adopted on second reading. May we now have a motion on adoption?
Second?
Motion and second. On roll call for adoption, Mr. Gallagher.
Joe, I just want to make one comment. I want to say that I want to thank Chief Roddy, Robert, and Fred for all their great work. Chief Roddy, I've only used this with Sheriff Gannon, is the right man at the right time for the right job. And I really appreciate him looking at this new problem and coming up with a new solution that's going to benefit every one of us. So, absolutely, aye.
Mr. Ferramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
So adopted. Ordinance number 34-2019. The summary of this ordinance appeared in full in accordance with law in the Thursday, September 5th issue of the Daily Record. And because it was a bond ordinance, the bond law permits a summary of the ordinance. And the title of this ordinance is an ordinance of the Township Committee of the Township of Hanover in the County of Morris and State of New Jersey, authorizing the warranty of the payment of the principal of and interest on not to exceed $6,100,000 aggregate principal amount of county guaranteed governmental loan revenue bonds, Series 2019, for the Whippany Firehouse project, issued by the Morris County Improvement Authority for the purpose of providing additional security therefore and determining certain other matters in connection therewith. Just for the record, members of the Whippany Fire Company, the Fire District, representatives of the Morris County Improvement Authority, and myself represented or made a presentation concerning this ordinance before the State Local Finance Board yesterday morning in Trenton, and I am pleased to report that the Local Finance Board approved the revenue bonds. So this is a part of the formality with the adoption of the ordinance. So at this time, may we have a motion to convene the public hearing?
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Francioli, seconded by Mr. Gallagher. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Aye.
Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Is there anyone in chambers wishing to be heard concerning ordinance number 34-2019? Seeing none, hearing none, may we have a motion to close the public hearing? A motion by Mr.
Second.
Ferramaska, seconded by Mr. Gallagher. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill. And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Now, on adoption, be it resolved that an ordinance entitled An Ordinance of the Township Committee of the Township of Hanover in the County of Morris and State of New Jersey, authorizing the warranty of the payment of the principal of and interest on not to exceed $6,100,000 aggregate principal amount of county guaranteed governmental loan revenue bonds, Series 2019, for the Whippany Firehouse project, issued by the Morris County Improvement Authority for the purpose of providing additional security therefore and determining certain other matters in connection therewith, be adopted on final reading, and that a final notice of the ordinance be published in the Morris County Daily Record in accordance with law. May we now have a motion on adoption?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Mahalko, or Mr. Cahill, seconded by Mr. Mahalko. On roll call for adoption, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
So adopted. Now, Ron, on this ordinance, you need to sign in two places.
Each place.
Yeah, two places. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we now continue with our agenda on pages 2 and 3 with ordinances for introduction. And these ordinances can be taken as a consent agenda. So the consent agenda for introduction of ordinances as set forth on your agenda, ordinance number 35-2019, 36-2019, ordinance 37-2019, ordinance number 38-2019, and ordinance number 39-2019. All of these ordinances will be published with the ordinances and notices of introduction, with the exception of ordinance number 38, 2019, because it's a very lengthy ordinance. The municipal land use law provides that a summary of that ordinance be published, and all the notices of introduction and the summary for that one particular ordinance will be published in the September 18th issue of the Daily Record. All the ordinances will be docketed for consideration of public hearing and adoption at the meeting of October 10th at 8 p.m. here in the main meeting room. And at that time, any person wishing to be heard, any of those ordinances which appear at this time for introduction as a consent agenda, will be given the opportunity to speak. So at this time, may we have a motion on the introduction of ordinances as a consent agenda? That's ordinances 35 through 39.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Ferramaska, seconded by Mr. Gallagher. And roll call for introduction. Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
And Mr. Franciola.
Aye.
So introduced. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have the consent agenda of the resolutions, which appear at the bottom of page 3 and onto page 4. And we do have an additional resolution that was discussed during the legal conference, which is being added. And I'm going to read that title into the record. So it's resolutions A through E, and this will be docketed as, A through F, and this will be docketed as Resolution G. It's a resolution of the Township Committee authorizing the release of the $198,068 performance surety rider bond and the $22,080 cash bond, plus a portion of the interest, pursuant to Public Law 1985, Chapter 315, to Fleet Hanover, LLC, as a result of completing all of the bonded site improvements related to the construction of 24 single-family attached townhouse dwellings in 6 separate buildings and related site improvements on property located at 325 Whippany Road in the Whippany section of the Township, and designated as Lot 29 in Block 4701, as set forth on the Township's tax map. And this approval is conditioned on Fleet Hanover, LLC, submitting to the Business Administrator Township Clerk a 2-year site improvement maintenance bond in the amount of $47,662.65, which represents 15% of the allowable bonded items. Are there any questions from members of the Township Committee on any of the resolutions on the consent agenda?
None?
Seeing none, hearing none, then with the approval of the consent agenda, including the one additional resolution that was discussed in legal conference, may we have a motion on approval?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Ferramaska, seconded by Mr. Francioli. And on approval, Mr. Gallagher?
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska?
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko?
Yes.
Mr. Cahill?
Yes.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
So approved. Resolutions.
Moving on to these, that's your...
Put bond ordinance here, that's important. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we continue now with the payment of bills. Total amount of the payment of bills, $5,601,603.73. May we have a motion on the approval of payment of our bills?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Gallagher, seconded by Mr. Francioli. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
And raffle applications which appear on your agenda, raffle applications 3227 through raffle application 3235. Are there any questions about any of the raffle applications?
Move they be approved.
Seeing none, hearing none, motion by Mr. Faramasca for approval. Second by Mr. Mahalko. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramasca.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Aye.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
So approved. Mr. Chairman, members of the Township Committee, that clears the agenda of the Business Administrator, Township Clerk, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Very good. Covered a lot there. All right, gentlemen, at this time, I'd like to open the floor once again. Motion to
So
open.
moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open. Anyone who would like to address the Township Committee at this time may do so from the podium, giving us your name and address for the record.
Hi there, my name is Terry Baird, 180 Parsippany Road in the Whippany section of Hanover. You had in your legal conference agenda about a letter from EDAC about Valley National Bank, and I realize that's part of legal, and you probably can't I'm not asking what's actually in the letter, but it piqued my interest because in there it's listed to become before you during the legal session, and I've been reading the minutes of EDAC, and I don't see anything in there about a letter, any letter going to about Valley National Bank. So I was wondering what the process was for a letter, why a letter from EDAC would be coming before you for legal, and why I didn't see it in any of the minutes.
I can comment upon it as far as I can go. And I can tell you that the genesis of the letter occurred after the most recent EDAC meeting. And it was a discussion between myself, the chair, the vice chair of EDAC, and that letter then was recommended to be sent to Township Committee for its review. But I'm not at liberty to discuss that because this Township Committee hasn't even read the letter yet.
Yeah, I'm not asking about the content
So
of the letter.
that's the process.
I'm asking about the process.
That's the process.
So the process, it came from some EDAC members, but not, it's not all the whole EDAC.
Not all of EDAC. No, letters like this typically come like other groups where Mr. Gallagher and I served for 2 years as subcommittee members of affordable housing. There's other subcommittee members on EDAC which will work together and they will come up with initiatives. I'll talk about some subcommittee work tonight, but that's why that letter was not discussed at EDAC, because EDAC's not even aware of it, just the subcommittee members of EDAC.
Okay, all right. So knowing that, I'd like to go back to a letter that was received by the tenants of Pine Plaza. They received a letter from EDAC, and the letter basically said that under the understanding that their leases will be terminated or expiring, and that they'll be having to move. Now, they received the letter, I believe, on July 20th, but the letter was written on July 11th. And again, I went back through the minutes, and I can't find anything for this letter that's, it's on Township letterhead, and it's, from EDAC to the tenants of Pine Plaza, but it didn't go to all the tenants of Pine Plaza, it only went to some of them. So I was wondering if you could explain where that letter was generated from, and how that one didn't come before the Township Committee.
I cannot comment specifically on that letter because I was not at the EDAC meeting when that would have been discussed. There again, you're dealing with a business retention issue. EDAC is very concerned about trying to help facilitate businesses within Hanover Township remain in Hanover Township. As we all know, Pine Plaza has been failing for 10 years at least, and as a result of the failure of Pine Plaza, that owner has been less than supportive of its tenants. But the members of EDAC, I do know, have been responsive in terms of trying to provide support to tenants or businesses, regardless of their location within Hanover Township, because we want them all to succeed and we want to help them. But I can't give you any specifics because I'm not aware of it.
But that's not the question that I'm really asking. Maybe I wasn't clear. Is that this letter was given out to people on official township letterhead, but I did not see, I went back through the agendas for the township committee, like this letter is going before you in the back room. How come this letter for Pine Plaza did not come,
I can't speak to it specifically. I can only tell you that letters could have different needs. And the letter dealing with tenants in the specific area that you're talking about may have a different purpose and have a different level of confidentiality as a result of it than a different type of letter. And I'm trying not to be obtuse, but I'm trying to also share with you the reality of it, because information needs to be kept legally, carefully, and disclosing information to members of the public prior to initiatives occurring could be potentially negatively impacting a party. So that's why I believe the Valley letter, which you're talking about, is being treated the way it is. And as far as the letter for the Pine Plaza issue, I can't tell you the specifics on it. I shared with you as much as I could as to how they went about it and why they do what they do.
Is your question, Terry, why isn't all their correspondence coming before the Township Committee?
Yeah, I think
Is that what you're
because I read, what the composition of EDAC is and in the town laws, and it seems, how I understand it, and I could be wrong, is that they, when they write correspondence, that it's supposed to go before the business administrator and then the Township Committee before it goes out. And my concern is that because I couldn't find it, I went looking for it specifically, and I couldn't find it anywhere, but it went out to these tenants at Pine Plaza, and in reality, if you go and you speak to the tenants of Pine Plaza, that is the first notification that they have that they were losing basically their livelihood of what they have available to them at Pine Plaza.
You're suggesting that the correspondence was informing them of their termination from EDAC?
Yes, because prior to that, the tenants of Pine Plaza have had no official notification. They don't know that the place is for sale because the landlord is in some kind of agreement with probably the developer, and has not disclosed anything to the tenant. And I don't think he has to, by law, disclose anything until it's sold. So if it's not sold, their really first notification that their leases would be ending, it really came from that letter. Like, that's the only official thing that they have on paper, and it came from...
To my knowledge, I don't know. I know that, as the Deputy Mayor commented, that they are working earnestly on a new mission, and that's business retention throughout the town.
And I understand, because I did sit through the last EDAC meeting, and I did see, one of the tenants of Pine Plaza came, and I, observed that discussion, but in reality, the letter, and that letter wasn't given to every single business in Pine Plaza. There are some that did not get that letter. It was hand-delivered.
I don't know.
And so I question...
Without the letter, without having a copy of the letter...
We can look into the method of distribution for the letter.
I can't respond to you. I don't know what this is.
So then my question then to follow up with that is, so when a letter comes from EDAC...
Were you privy to such a letter? Did you get such a letter?
No, somebody sent me a picture of
Somebody
it.
sent you something that,
Yeah, I mean, I took a picture of it, I couldn't have it because it's not like I have a copy machine on my body, so I took a picture of it and I printed it out and I looked at it and,
I would be astonished if we did something of that nature, because they have been very careful and cautioned by council as well of what their parameters of what their limits are in speaking to any tenant of Pine Plaza. So if they addressed any letters at all, and I don't know that they did, it would be in a format for business retention of businesses in the town and a willingness to want to help them remain in the town. That's all I can
well, it's just
possibly-
that the way it states in there about them being, that they're understanding that their tenants of Pine Plaza will be losing their leases by the end of summer. And that's what, these businesses got. And that's why the businesses were really
And who
upset.
signed the letter? This letter was signed by whom?
It was signed by Susan somebody?
Who?
Susan, Susan Shannon?
Then you have the letter.
I have it, yeah. Well, I don't have like the official letter, but I have my picture of it.
May we see it?
Sure. I apologize for being a little dark, but that's the best I can get out of it.
Yeah, that's the Hanover Township seal.
Very observant, Ace.
But is it an official
Let's read the
letter?
letter. Let's see what it is.
See what it is. Go ahead.
It is our understanding that leases for the shopping center may be expiring this summer. This is a subcommittee. This would appear to be an outreach on the part of a member of the EDAC committee.
I mean, the letter's dated July 11th, and that report from Phillips talking about the area and need of redevelopment with condemnation, that wasn't time stamped until the 12th, this following day. Because I came in and looked at it, so I know, what it had on there.
Let us have a moment to review it. I don't know what position to take on it. It's
I don't either, because to me, like, if I was a business, I think of myself as a business owner down there, and getting that, and that's the first thing I see. Like, first I want to say like it's a joke, and I want to like throw it back at somebody, but like that's the tenants of Pine Plaza, as of now, still have not received any notification from their landlord as to what is happening with Pine Plaza. I've spoken to several of them one-on-one. Not hearsay, from this person, that person, that person. I went right to the actual people to see what was going on.
Several of them have come into EDAC and have been invited into EDAC.
I only know of one, but I can only go by the minutes.
Yeah.
And there really isn't much that I guess EDAC can.
Well, we made it abundantly clear to whomever appeared before us in an official manner before the committee, the EDAC committee, that we had no powers, we had no rights to interfere between that party-to-party purchase of Pine Plaza by one to another, and we had no knowledge. Now, they did admit that to us that they had no formal notifications, but then again, to us, it wasn't something that we could comment on. We can't make the developer or the new purchaser correspond. We can't require that developer to talk to his tenants. It's not, it far exceeds what we would have rights to do.
Well, and I understand that because I did go to the last EDAC meeting. It was the first one that I went to.
Well, are you, what kind of an assumption are you making with this letter? Are you saying
I
it
don't
was
know.
damaged?
I'm trying to find the process. If the one for Valley National Bank has to go through, the Township Committee to be approved before it goes out, or it's looked at, or EDAC correspondence is looked at by the Township Committee or the business administrator, then I can only assume that this was, and I'm just telling you that the people, the tenants of Pine Plaza, that's really their first official piece of paper notification in black and white that, what's going to happen to them down there.
I'm sort of...
And it's very disheartening.
What assumption are you making that I don't know what you're trying to get to here?
Number one, I wanted to know the process. So I know the process.
EDAC writes on the behalf of the Economic Committee. They're an advisory committee. They're not, by ordinance, they're not empowered to take any actions. None. Strictly advisory, and everyone that ever has come before has been formally told that.
Right.
From yours truly, as a matter of fact. On the other hand, there are subcommittees, as Deputy Mayor mentioned, that we have operating in various areas, transportation, etc. They don't correspond, those letters, through the administrator sometimes.
A subcommittee
they'll do
doesn't.
outreach. It's in the normal process of their doing business. So once again, I'm not sure that this person's outreach wasn't on the part of their subcommittee in some fashion.
Yeah, this letter was not presented to me, Terry.
Right. So, Terry, can I suggest that, other than what you have in parentheses there was some misinformation. So somebody was ill-informed. And that the spirit of that letter is that the EDAC committee, the volunteers on that EDAC committee that served for many, many years, they just want to help. And they want to assist and try to retain these people who will be displaced because of the goings-on in the township. So with that understanding, there was a process or a step that was perhaps missed. I mean, let's just admit it, right? Maybe that happened. So I am sure that EDAC or the subcommittee or whoever was responsible will talk about that.
Would you like this
correct that step in the process, and we'll move on. But granted, I mean, there's no denying that the information in that does not match what the reality was. So a mistake was made.
Yeah, but the people at EDAC seem to know more information.
You're inferring that.
Yeah,
I suggest that they didn't. I suggest that they don't.
Yeah.
That's what I suggest. I would say, though, that once again, if we improve our process, perhaps something slips through the crack and it goes to our administrator, then this will never happen again. So allow us that sometimes mistakes are made.
Oh, yeah, I understand that sometimes mistakes are made, but I just wanted you to know, because you probably obviously don't know, that this is one of the things or hurdles that the tenants of Pine Plaza are dealing with.
And this was unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
It's very unsettling for somebody to receive a letter like that, plus all the hearsay of everything, and they don't know what, they're in limbo. They don't know what's going on. And these are all small businesses in our town that you're trying to keep these small businesses, try to be kinder to them or something, do help them somehow.
EDAC is taking particular care, I can say this, EDAC is taking particular care not to interfere with the matter of Pine Plaza, not with the new owners, not with the old owners. We made every effort with the old owners, as you might know, to try and energize the mall and their business. But under the circumstances, and once this fell into the process of Fair Share Housing's settlements with us, etc., and was a party to that, EDAC broke off all types of communication. It does not mean that they were not making earnest efforts to assist and wanting to assist shop owners of retailers, not just in Pine Plaza, but throughout the area. I made that particular request of them months ago that the mission of EDAC should be now business retention rather than new business. That's where we are. That's the best I can explain it.
Yeah, okay, well,
Yeah.
hopefully, some of them will
Thank you.
be able to stay
I'll
and
look
they'll
into
be
the
able
process.
to go to,
We want to keep everyone that we can.
yeah, okay, thank you.
And John and Ron, with all due respect, when I said that's the town emblem, and you said very observant, Ace, I was as surprised as you two, and you guys serve on EDAC. So I thought that was disrespectful and unnecessary, because I was shocked to see this letter. And when I said that is the town emblem, and you said very observant, Ace, that was a little bit disrespectful, because again, I was as shocked as you two, because I never saw
Let
it.
me tell you something, Ace. You're trying to make a mountain out of molehills. You've been trying to do this. That emblem is part of stationery for that. We have stationery for every one of our groups, whether it's Landmark, et cetera, has that seal on it.
But I mean,
Now, if this individual wrote a letter just on a blank piece of letterhead and said that they were looking to assist in, as the content of this letter said, it wouldn't have the, it wouldn't be identified in the manner that identifies it. That's what it does.
And like
So
Committeeman
it
Cahill
sounds
said,
like
the
to me,
content-
it sounds like to me like you're provoking something.
No, with Committeeman Cahill, I think the content is very good, because we want to retain these businesses. But I was just surprised that it took place, that's all. And when you looked at it, a little surprised, I said, from here, that's the town emblem. So we
Yes.
were all on the same page on this one.
I would hope so.
Absolutely. But like Committeeman Cahill said, the content is very good. We want to keep the businesses, and we've all worked very hard for months to do so.
Floor remains open. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Floor remains open on this subject. Freddie, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Yourself, Mayor?
Very well.
Would you like me to? How about this? How about I start out with Fred Brunner, president of the Whippany Fire Company, located at 440 Route 10, soon to be 10 Troy Hills Road. How does that sound? Does that sound all right?
It's good news.
I'd like to thank you for all your assistance, Joe, for riding along with us on yesterday's trip down to Trenton. It was successful. We were worried going in, and everything turned out well, as he said. Fred, you've been a great help going the first round back in, what was that, February, I think, somewhere? And the rest of the Township Committee, thank you again for all your support on behalf of the fire company and the commissioners who, unlike myself, stuck in town. They're down in Wildwood at the convention having a good time. So, again, thank you. Thank you for all your support.
Thank you,
From the
Fred.
beginning.
It's been a long, long road. God bless it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Floor remains open. Hearing none? Seeing none. Motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Gentlemen, Mr. Gallagher.
Thanks, Ron. First of all, welcome back to school. Hanover Township started school. I went to a back to school last night with the Ed Foundation to give out a trophy for the 5K. Also, School and Park Traffic Safety is working with AAA and Hanover Township PD to put out safety messages. Please be careful. All our kids are out there in the streets. All our kids are out there in the fields. I also want to say that Mike Mahalko, I'm sure you'll handle this one quite a bit, but Hanover Township Day was a great success with all our departments. The DPW, once again, lockstep with these guys, working very hard with all our groups. Very successful day. I want to say that we announced today that Friday Nights at Menon Arena is going to begin on January 3rd, 10 consecutive Friday nights throughout the winter. We're going to have a different theme every Friday night. And again, our biggest one is Law Enforcement Night, and we did speak to the fire department about having Firefighter Night. Next, vaping, the new youth epidemic. The New Jersey Coalition for Education and Positive Choices did a release and a paid boost on social media and with our website with 54 hard-hitting articles about the dangers of vaping, especially with our youth. It's accurate information, it's current, and it goes all the way up to the CDC. So we're very proud of the hard work that 19 towns and municipalities are doing, standing together. The township's also going to be looking at ordinances and what we can do in Hanover Township to better protect our kids. But it is the new epidemic. It is absolutely the new youth epidemic, and we're working very hard to let all of us know everything they can to combat and be more helpful in working with their families to try to keep this crisis to a minimum. Besides that, I hit Hanover Township Day. Besides that, I'll just say that for fall sports, the DPW have been working on the fields. They're working on their lead vacs, and hopefully pretty soon they don't have to work on their snow plows. But again, they're staying ahead of the curve. Everything looks great. And Mike, I'm going to give a little more time to you tonight for Hanover Township Day because that was the big one in town. Thanks, guys.
Brian, how you doing?
Very good, very good. Let me just return back real quick to the Cedar Knolls Fire Department 100-year anniversary. Congratulations again. I just wanted to mention that they had a great event on September 7th at the firehouse. Actually closed down Mountain Avenue and food and beer truck and all kinds of great stuff. They had approximately 700 attendees. So a great success there. Moving on to the Hanover Township Landmark Committee. So coming up on November 9th, they're having a service and a tour of the Whippany Burying Yard. So that'll be around Veterans Day between 10 a.m. and noon. It's usually a very informative tour. I suggest if you haven't been on that, to do it, to take it. Moving on to Hanover Township Police. I have the results now from a crackdown that they participated in. It was a state program. It was called, you've probably seen the signs, You Drive, You Text, You Pay, Distracted Driver Crackdown. It ran from April 1st to the 21st. I won't go through all the results. I will say, though, that, again, Hanover Township Police were top performers. They were number one in Morris County out of 30 municipalities that participated, and they were a top performer statewide. Like I said, there's a number of different categories here, but the purpose or the spirit of the program was to go after cell phone and texters that are driving. With the exception of Morris Township, Hanover Township is the only township that was in the three figures. So I'll just, Hanover Township had 179 tickets and or violations, with Morris Township at 144, and everybody else was basically well under 100. So great work by Hanover Township. They also, I believe, just completed the Labor Day, traditional Labor Day crackdown on DUI and DWI. So we'll have some results for that moving forward as well. Recently, you might have seen it on Facebook, Hanover Township Police is now participating with Neighbors, the Neighbors by Ring program. And basically it's an app that you can get on your phone. You merely need to dial 555-888 on your smartphone and type in Hanover, New Jersey, and it'll send you a link to the Ring app. You don't need to have a Ring device. You can still sign up for it, and I did it the other day. It's a pretty cool application. You can set a map, so if you want to be notified within a mile of your house, a half mile, 4 miles, and you just want to be notified on this side of Route 10, you can adjust the map. It's a pretty powerful application, but it's a great way to not only get informed, but also be able to communicate and inform others of suspicious activities or goings on in the community. So. Again, that's 555-888 on your smartphone, and then just type in Hanover, New Jersey. Lastly, coming up October 5th, the Hanover Police Department PBA 128 will be having their annual Seafood Truck Brew Fest. It's moved from the golf center on Route 10 over to the Brickyard Fields. It'll be from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. with games, activities, live music, craft beers, and lots of food trucks. And the rumor is that there will also be, weather permitting, a hot air balloon there, so it should be pretty interesting. If you want more details or to purchase discounted tickets, go to hanovertwppba128.com, and on that website, if you click on the Brewfest button, it'll get you to a place where you can purchase tickets. And that's
Thank you. Very complete. Committeeman Mahalko.
Always a lot going on in the Rec Department, but I'll try to keep it short and sweet. I have a lot of people to thank because Hanover Township Day was fantastic. It was a great day. I saw a lot of people there. It was one of our best. Well over 3,000 residents were there. And we can't thank Denise Brennan and the Rec Department. Can't thank them enough. The Rec Commissioners for their support. They were even out there operating some of the games and the boats. DPW, as always, did a fantastic job to pull this event off. Brian Ferran and his group, boys, did a great job. But I really want to thank the sponsors we always say the sponsors, but these people do kick in time, money, manning tables, manning booths, but really, and also supplies. So I really want to point out to them, and I'll just go through this real quick. Cedar Knolls Fire Department, they actually donated one of the bounce houses, the Dalmatian bounce house. What's it? Dorsey and Samarow. Who's that? They actually they donated the balloon art. That's our attorney here. Wait, you weren't out there painting? Hanover Soccer did the soccer kick. Hearts Mountain did the face painting. Knights of Columbus, the corn on the cob and the cooking of the corn on the cob. Morris County Parks, paddle boats. Paper Mill Playhouse donated some play tickets. Quick Check, the bottled water was donated by Quick Check. Rec Commission donated the ice pops and the ice cream sandwiches. ShopRite also donated more bottled water. Wegmans, our great neighbor as always, 2,000 hot dogs, rolls, condiments, watermelon. Also want to thank the Rotary for doing all the cooking. They do a terrific job, and they served a lot of hot dogs that day. Everything went.
Knights of Columbus? Did you get the Knights of Columbus?
Knights of Columbus, yep, the corn on the cob and the cooking, yep. I got them right in the middle, sorry. But they always do a great job also. So thank all of the sponsors and the groups that came out. Again, a fantastic day. Just real quick, I want to go over a couple of the fall programs that are coming up. Pat Sage's Memorial Basketball Tournament is on Saturday, November 9th. For you that don't know, he was one of our rec commissioners who passed away last winter. Really great man. And but they're going to have a basketball tournament, 3-on-3. Check out the website. You can see how to sign up, put a team together, come out, and have a good time. So we're going to have a tournament there. Again, that was on November 9th. September 21st, there's a bus trip to the Yankees game, although there's only a few tickets left. So if you're interested, call right away. Call the rec department tomorrow. I think there's down to a handful of tickets left. October 20th, there's also an Atlantic City trip to Caesars, bus trip down and back. And finally, Masquerade at Malapartis Park, Saturday, October 26th. Masquerade at Malapartis Park. We all know what a great event that is. And even if it goes on rain or shine, if it does rain, we move it into Memorial School, and actually goes very well there also. So hope we will see you all there. So thank you.
Yeah, well, that's what we had when it rained. The Memorial School did a great job with that.
Yeah, it actually flowed really well there.
Yeah, matter of fact, I think it was more fun than it was just in the park. Oh, Hanover Township Day was a huge success. I think it was one of our biggest
Well
ever.
done. Well
Yeah.
Well done.
Deputy Mayor.
Under the theme, great things happen in Hanover, Hanover welcomed Lowe's Home Improvement to the township. It's a 95,000 square foot state-of-the-art home improvement store. It's spectacular, very well laid out. In addition to it not only being a great store, it's a convenience store in that it's got parking. If you have handicap, there's ample parking for handicap. And in addition to recognizing the handicap, they're also recognizing U.S. veterans. So if you're a veteran, you have special parking spaces as well at the new Lowe's. The grand opening was special. It was no ordinary ribbon cutting nonsense. It was a board cutting. It was 2x8, cut it in half. Impressive.
Took time.
Repeat, it was a board cutting, not a ribbon cutting. This is an important milestone for Hanover Avenue in that the new Lowe's completes what we call the reinvention of Hanover Avenue from distressed, outdated, many closed industrial sites to now a very prosperous retail zone, which is probably the envy of much of Morris County. Planning Board. Planning Board was busy during the month of August. They reviewed two applications, two major applications. One for something called AC Marriott Hotel. What's an AC Marriott Hotel, you ask? That's a business hotel. That hotel is designed for the business travel. It's an upscale hotel. They want it to be very close to the Morristown Airport, which is in Hanover Township. And they got their approval to develop the site at what's called the Old Red Oak Bank. So we went from a bank that's been out of operation for many years to a professional services, now to a major hotel coming into that part of town. On smaller scale, Hanover will soon have its very own brew pub. The brew pub will be located at the site of the old Whippany Post Office. It was a unanimous decision by the planning board, with the exception of one member who decided to recuse himself from that application. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about trans options. Hanover Township was recognized by Trans Options for what they call a Gold Award. And this Gold Award represents the fact that in Trans Option recognized Hanover as one of the best places to work for providing commuting options for its employees. So I think that's very important that, companies in general, let alone townships, take into account the needs of its employees to facilitate their commuting time. So Hanover is well recognized today. That concludes my remarks.
Well, thank you very much. Very good. Which makes mine even that much more brief. Just for the record, there was one individual on the planning board who reclused themselves on the vote on the beer garden, and that was yours truly. But as was posted on Facebook, I did not recluse myself for reasons of conflicts of interest. I have no conflict of interest where that's concerned. I own no properties around that area, as was indicated in some other posts, etc. So just to keep the record straight, my reclusing myself was because I have been concentrating on that property for acquisition for open space parklands. It was part of a historic site at one time. Township Committee understood my position on that, but I just want to make it abundantly clear for the record, there was no conflict of interest on that. Having said that, Board of Health had met this past Wednesday evening. The flu shots are available to you for free here at Town Hall. Free if you're a senior. Are we charging below? I think it's free. Yeah, I think it is totally free. October 23rd, which is a Wednesday, from 10 to noon. October 23rd, 10 to noon. Usually at the rec center. We'll post more as we get closer. And the second date, if you want to keep it in your book, is November the 13th, which is also a Wednesday, 10 to noon as well. We had some inquiries, interestingly enough, at the Board of Health level, and they do investigate everything on this new generation of telecommunications, the 5G network systems that are coming into play. And there seems to be some concern out there that the 5G networks might operate in a way that causes issues and afflictions, and autism was brought up. Dr. Perez of our health department, along with Dr. Van Orden, etc., responded to any neighbor who makes such a inquiry like this and assured them that the facts that we had did not indicate that there was a health issue with 5G networks. I just wanted everyone to be assured on that. That's pretty much all I have. Unless there's any other comment from the committee, we'll take a motion for adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Adjourn. We have to talk, buddy. Yeah.
I'm going to talk to you right now.
Any way you want.
Why don't you guys take this?
Fred.